Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all, and I'm very pleased and excited to be with Klarenberg today. He's a British investigative journalist, and his work exposes the role of intelligence services in shaping politics and perception. That's why he is gaining lots of enemies recently from the good people in the establishment, and recently he was banned and suspended from X, Elon Musk's free speech platform. His Substack account is in the description below, guys. Hit him a follow and read his amazing work. Kit, thank you so much, brother, for being with me today. And I would assume that you have enraged some of the big heads. That's why you were suspended from X, the free speech platform.
Yeah, I mean, there's been mass reporting of my Twitter output ever since October 7th by Zionist activists, and the final straw seemed to have been when I mentioned there's this rather remarkable interview with two female hostages. Two Israeli Jewish women who were taken hostage by Hamas. And they seem to have rather enjoyed the experience. And one rather wistfully recalls how she had been told by her captors they might find her a husband in Gaza, and that they treated her as sacred and like a queen. So I suggested that they'd met real men for the first time in their life, and part of them wished that they were still there. And this was the final straw, it seems. And I was boastfully mass reported by a large number of people who were falsely framing what I'd said as somehow an endorsement of rape. I mean, it was absolutely staggering. I mean, of course, there's been a lot of allegations that Hamas engaged in such activity. I never thought that it was remotely credible, and almost daily now we're getting confirmation that all of the initial wave of reports were completely bogus. The New York Times has just yet again been forced to make a retraction by token of having published a rather lurid article, one of the authors of whom did not have a journalistic background, had previously served in the IDF, and was sharing and liking all sorts of posts on Twitter and Facebook that were calling for the genocide of the Palestinians. So, I mean, it's as the rather wonderful Jewish comedian Alexei Sayle has said on many occasions, Zionists lie and they lie and they lie. I think that I'm rather unsurprised that my account got taken down. This has happened to quite a few people. Usually they're reinstated very promptly due to backlash. There, I mean, I'm extremely grateful. A large number of people spoke up and drew attention to this. There was widespread outcry. I've been given conflicting information from X. They've said my account is permanently suspended. Oh, you'll be back in a month. You'll be back in 3 months. I mean, we shall see. I mean, I think that it's particularly sinister, though, because I mean, beyond it being a kind of free speech issue, and Musk being very, very making a lot of noise about how he wants people to be able to say whatever they like on X. I mean, bearing in mind that he's a Pentagon contractor, there might be a more sinister motivation behind that. Just having a single archive that can be used against you in court at some point further down the line, perhaps. But just more generally, is that as X is trying to become a quote unquote everything app, and then take over the same territory as YouTube and Substack and LinkedIn and maybe even dating apps and stuff, and maybe even digital banking. To be locked out like that, kind of arbitrarily for political reasons. I mean, we can easily imagine one of the reasons that a lot of people are rightfully very scared of digital currencies is that governments could do the same to you for saying the wrong thing, and therefore completely cut you out of any ability to operate economically. Buy things, receive income. It's really quite extraordinary, and yes, very, very grave. I mean, what with all of the developments across Europe since October 7th have been last year, have been towards totalitarian control over what people are allowed to say and think. And there were the French government initially moved to try and criminalize anti-Zionist activism, which is just absolutely shocking. And they did. God bless the French; they're rather good at protesting and making a ruckus. The government did back down, but that threat hasn't gone anywhere. And recently there was a vote for a ceasefire in Britain's Parliament, and Keir Starmer has the Labour leader has admitted that he was coordinating with Zionist entity officials before before they voted against it. There was the rather disturbing image of all these Israeli flags in the House of Commons. It just raises very obvious questions about like what kind of world not only are we living in, but have we been living in for a very long time, and indeed whether behind rhetoric around progressivism and just general delusions about the kind of nature of the Western world, whether we've been living in a fascist, an outright fascist state for a very long time without people actually noticing. I mean, that would be very much be my reading. And so the push everywhere is towards state control of perception, state control of the flow of information. It's just completely brazen now, and there's rather disturbingly, there's a large number of people who have been successfully manipulated and propagandized into welcoming this, demanding it. There were a large number of people in the wake of my banning from Twitter who were openly saying that I should be jailed. The base of, what
I saw a few.
And then meanwhile you have prominent Zionists completely unashamed at the ICJ's bombshell findings against Israel not long ago, who are still praising the Israeli occupation force genocide and posting absolutely repulsive comments about Muslims and Islam and Palestinians and Arabs, and it's never ending, and the double standards are very clear. I mean, there was this one guy who openly stated that he thought I should be battered regularly. Bear in mind that I've made just for my political opinions. That post is still up there. He hasn't been banned. And meanwhile, it's very clear from my overall kind of Twitter if you can call it that I am very condemnatory of violence. I'm a pacifist by nature. Of course, I speak from my own perspective. If I'd been living in an open-air concentration camp where my friends and family were routinely killed for fun by psychopaths, my take might be rather different. But from my position of relative privilege, I can say I'm a pacifist committed to non-violence on a personal and political level. But sorry, go on.
Kid, for example, I mean, we're sitting here in our comfort, right? But if you were born in the Gaza Strip, let's say in 2006, and you have seen nothing but the siege and the concentration camp, and this is the terminologies that we're using are approved by human rights organizations, and even Israeli officials, they admitted that it's an open air concentration camp, right? It's not like we are politicizing this term or using it for media consumption. No, these are technical and legal terms used to describe the Gaza Strip. If you were born there and you haven't seen anything but that small region, and then you saw one of your relatives was killed or murdered, or your mother was killed, what options do you have in the Gaza Strip but to join one of the available armed groups to participate in armed resistance against the Israeli occupation forces, right? So the people, when they come and condemn Hamas or jihad, or they want to condemn their ideologies, for example, I mean, in the 80s, in the 70s, most of the armed resistance against the Israeli occupation were the left-wingers, they were the communists, they were the socialists, and still they were called terrorists, right? In any ways, whether you hold a left-wing ideology or a right-wing ideology, it doesn't matter. For the occupation, they will frame you as a terrorist. And your work was very prominent, in my opinion, here. And I just want to tell you, you're not alone on X. Everybody who had a little bit of integrity, they voiced their objection that you were suspended on X. And we were speaking with Elon in the comments and everything. This time, it seems the pressure was high, or there was I would say a telegram probably they received in X that they have to ban you from this platform. But this is not this is, in my opinion, the least of the problems that you faced, because in May 2023, upon your arrival to London to visit your family, you were asked by British counter-terror officers to accompany them. You were digitally strip searched, interrogated, in which had no right to stay silent and no right to withhold PIN numbers for your digital devices and SIM cards. They fingerprinted you, they took in invasive DNA swabs and probed every conceivable aspect of your private and professional life. I'm just describing what they did to you. They wanted to know, why do you do investigative journalism and how are you paid and to which bank account? In the climate of what happened to you, what happened to what happened to Julian Assange, for example, recently, it seems to me challenging authority nowadays via journalistic work has become a really dangerous business, right? And you were detained under Britain's 2019 Counterterrorism and Border Security Act for suspected, quote, hostile activity. I mean, there is a lot to unpack here. Let's start with the hostile activities. What is a hostile activity? Who defines it? And were you aware that your journalistic work is considered a hostile act in your home country?
I mean, well, I kind of assumed that I was not well liked by the British government. I mean, that wasn't my objective. I mean, my overriding professional objective is to expose inconvenient truths, because that's what journalism is meant to be about. I'd like to think if I was living in a country like Russia and China, I would be doing the same. But no, I was born in free democratic England, where journalism is regarded as terrorism these days. So I mean, in effect, that was really. I mean, it was really rather disturbing, because I mean, when you fly back to your home country to visit a rather unwell relative. And you may not, you rush back because you might not see them again. And then there's 6 police officers waiting for you personally on the tarmac. And then you are led without explanation into the terminal by this group of police officers who, and then you're then informed that, well, you have a choice of being subject to a 6-hour detention and interrogation where you don't have a right to silence or privacy and you face arrest for not answering questions, or you can just be arrested. And then it's really it's really extraordinary. If you read the fine print of the legislation under which I was stopped, which has been condemned by the UN, I might add, that they say it creates a thought crime. Boy, does it! It states, well, because you're not under arrest. Therefore, you don't have a right to silence, as you would if you were under arrest. Now, Britain is the country which invented the right to silence, and at one stage it was so rigidly observed as a principle in law that it was actually illegal for people to testify in their own defense, because it was felt improper that their words could be used against them. So, I mean, that's just gone now. I mean, and that is a very, very clear signifier of where Britain has got to in terms of its political and legal system. But there's also, you mentioned, who defines hostile acts? It is basically whatever the British government wants it to be. Now, there's another kind of devil in the detail here, which is that it is stated you can be carrying out hostile acts on behalf of a foreign power without the foreign power knowing you are, and without you knowing you are. And this is a sentence that I've uttered many times, but it never gets any less prescient. It's quite some conspiracy when you and the person you're conspiring or organization you're conspiring with don't know you're conspiring. Thought crime. But I think that it's particularly relevant to consider what happened to me in the wake of the passing of the National Security Act. This is this absolutely staggering bit of legislation, which was the British lawmakers openly stated that their purpose was to basically criminalize WikiLeaks and prevent another WikiLeaks from happening. And the lawyers involved who are part of major press organisations in the UK have openly stated that this is basically the death of investigative journalism, because journalists, if you can even call them that, are going to be extremely worried about what they cover and don't cover. And I mean, already Britain has a certain chilling effect baked into its media scene, because there is a body known as the Defence and Security Media Advisory Committee, which is theoretically an advisory body run by the Ministry of Defence and MI5 and MI6, and representatives of Britain's security and intelligence and military apparatus sit down with the editors of major newspapers and tell them how things can be reported on, and what things can be reported on, and what can't. And so, in theory, I mean, this is very British. You can, as a journalist, say, well, I'm not going to comply with this advice to not publish particular facts or not go near a story. The examples of it being broken in history are like virtually none, because it's well understood that, well, this will damage my standing. I might get blacklisted. I won't get exclusives. I won't get to press briefings, and maybe, just maybe, someone will have words with my editor, and I'll lose my job, or I could end up prosecuted. So, I mean, yes, this is now an even graver situation for free speech in Britain. It is almost inevitable that people will break the law without wanting to, intending to, knowing they are, because again, it's all very vague. So there is this one particularly troubling section where it states, well, we can convict someone of working for a foreign power, even if we don't know which foreign power it is, and how they are how they are personally benefiting, or the foreign power is benefiting from their actions, which is just like, I mean, that's someone getting jailed for years for saying the wrong thing on Twitter because the British government alleges that this furthers foreign disinformation narratives. I mean, and there was virtually no serious criticism or analysis of this legislation at all at any point when it was going through Parliament. My dear friend Mohammed Almassian, although I probably shouldn't drop him in it by saying he's my friend, he might get his door kicked in by some thugs. He did some incredible legwork on this, and he really stood apart from the rest of. I mean, even independent journalists didn't really go near it. And this is like a hugely significant, seismic shift in the relationship between British citizens and the state. And I might add that, you don't need to even be in Britain to commit to. You just need to be a UK citizen anywhere in the world.
Wow.
Extraordinarily broad, sweeping. The powers are as yet untested. They will be used. There will be pilot test cases, I'm absolutely certain, of people, particularly I would imagine around Palestinian solidarity activism, getting jailed. Tony Greenstein of Stop the War Coalition in the UK, he's being prosecuted under terrorism laws for Palestine solidarity. Craig Murray, likewise, it seems, well, he's at least under investigation for supporting terrorism somehow. I mean, this is an extremely good person who blew the whistle on CIA and MI6 torture in Kazakhstan. And the British state attempted to ruin his life, and he's already been jailed for his reporting on the show trial of Alexander Salmond, which luckily for Alex, collapsed. And in convicting him of reporting the wrong things about the trial, the presiding judge said independent media should be held to a much higher standard than legacy media. So it's basically saying, well, if you're a blogger, like you're gonna be going to jail, but if you work for the Daily Mail, you get a slap on the wrist. So yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, I think that we've reached a point now where the powers that be are just, I mean, A, they are desperate, but B, they because they know they can get away with these things. They're willing to do almost anything. Like they don't care that their hypocrisy is absolutely unambiguous, like all the time. I mean, if you think about the mere appointment of David Cameron, who was the architect of Britain's adoption of austerity economics, which has killed about 300,000 people by some estimates, and like just devastated communities, impoverished a significant proportion of the population, who was likewise criticized very viciously by a parliamentary inquiry into the absolute catastrophe of the bombing of Libya, and blamed him personally for all manner of awful criminal decisions made during that illegal war of aggression, which turned Libya the most prosperous, stable country in Africa to an open-air slave market, and precipitated the refugee crisis in Europe. After taking Britain out of the EU, effectively, he then went into the private sector and made an enormous amount of money, leveraging his government contacts to do so. He's been looked into, and nothing's happened, even though what he was doing was deeply corrupt. And then now he's been appointed as a member of Britain's unelected House of Lords into one of the most influential and powerful positions within the British government. I mean, it's astonishing.
Yeah. Wasn't he also the foreign minister during the days when Assad must go?
He was prime minister. Yeah, he was prime minister.
Yeah. Assad's days are numbered, and I mean, all this that you mentioned, it really gives me the conviction, which I'm already convinced. But when I hear from someone like you, and I truly believe that we are heading to dystopian times, and especially, like, for example, myself, I'm just a Syrian living in Germany, and I thought like I have my freedom to express my opinion, right? And I was naive when I first came in 2015, and I expressed my opinion about the Syrian war, and also expressed my opinion on the root cause of the refugee crisis. And you are in one report, you're considered by the German press that you are a fascist for saying that the root cause goes back to the terrorist groups in Syria that were funded and supported by several Western governments, etc., etc. So they tarnish your reputation, and they are very influential nowadays. Like who owns Google, and who owns the search engines, and who owns the major publications? And if they write a few articles about you, it's a character assassination. You will lose your job. You may not find a job again in your entire life. So this is some sort of an economic prison that they have established that is invisible and people cannot see it. And you mentioned to me that I think this will also get worse in the future. And I truly believe that the matter of free speech has become too controversial or too threatening to the people in power nowadays, that the people can like they're afraid of a great awakening, especially that the social media platforms have become like a double-edged sword. It can be used against the people, but also the people can mobilize themselves against the people in power, right? So it is somehow dangerous to the people in power. And one of the people who thought that by revealing the main motives of the wars, Julian Assange in this case, he can stop the wars, right? Because if the people know why their governments are going to war in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in Syria, in Somalia, why are they bombing Libya, etc., people may push against these war narratives. Julian Assange on February 20 and 21st, he had his final chance to avoid extradition to the United States, where I don't say prosecuted, I say persecuted under the Espionage Act, and he could face up to 175 years in jail. And also, according to Declassified UK, the FBI is studying to press new charges against him, some of which could end up with a death penalty against Julian Assange. And this is happening in a country whose Secret Service plotted to assassinate him, right, just a few years back. But it's not only the US who persecuted him. The UK Secret Service spared no effort in framing Assange as a Russian agent. And what are the facts about this case? Does this allegation stand on any leg, or is it completely fabricated and the black propaganda disseminated by a network of intelligence operatives? Assange is a Russian agent, and he received all these, let's say, documents from Russia, facilitated by Russia, in order to tarnish the reputation of the United States.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was interesting because I have seen. I mean, I saw when his potentially last ditch effort to prevent being extradited to the US and spending the rest of his life in a supermax prison in the most inhuman, vile conditions imaginable, or indeed just get straight up death penalty. A key a kind of key smear that I saw go around, and there were lots of quote unquote disinformation experts who peddled this, was that yes, that well, he did receive documents from Russia, or he was somehow working in Russia's interests. Again, very vague. The reality is that there were many attempts to try and link WikiLeaks to Russia one way or another. The CIA was tearing its absolute hair out trying to find something. I would suggest that the hacked DNC emails, which allegedly were hacked by Russia, even though there was no evidence to substantiate the charge, and the DNC servers were not inspected by the FBI or the CIA. They were just inspected by CrowdStrike, which is this rather shady private security company, and they based their case that this was Russia on the fact there was Cyrillic text in some of the source code. The CIA creates tools that lay false trails to blame other countries for their own hacks, which includes, yes, inserting foreign language text into source code. So it does. So I strongly suspect that the purpose of the DNC emails was just to get them out there because they were quite damning, but also that I mean, poor Seth Rich, who died in rather mysterious circumstances, and his murder's never been solved, and that all sorts of documents about his laptop and what was on it, and other aspects of his rather strange and for a very, very tragic death. Are not going to be released now due to court order. One wonders why. The CIA had all manner of reasons to hack and leak those files, and yes, like falsely attribute WikiLeaks to Russia one way or another. But I think that the key. There's a core component of this that was rather missed, which is there is my old friend's Integrity Initiative, which is this black propaganda intelligence cutout staffed by kind of MI5 and MI6 veterans and British military intelligence veterans who were concerned with basically trying to incite war with Russia. And one component of that was spreading false stories about Russia in the media, in order to demonize the country and encircle them diplomatically, turn them into a pariah, kind of on a public and state level across the West. And then this would they hoped lay the foundations for war with Russia, which the West will win. And we're seeing the embarrassing failure of that effort unfold every day in the fields and hills of eastern Ukraine. Yeah. But I think that the Integrity Initiative spread false stories that Julian was somehow working for the Russians and was at the forefront of this Russian campaign to destabilize Spain and via the Catalan independence referendum in 2017. This was devastatingly effective, and this effort not only damaged relations between Spain and Russia, but which at one stage were actually quite strong, and there were Spanish politicians who were calling for a negotiated peace with Russia in eastern Ukraine, which seems kind of unimaginable now. But not only that, it led to Julian's internet being cut off by the government of Ecuador because they said, oh, well, he's meddling in other countries' affairs and we can't have this. And almost immediately, the second that his internet was cut off, the British government launched something in secret called Operation Pelican, which was an effort to effectively woo and schmooze the government of Ecuador into allowing them to arrest Assange in the embassy. And there was all sorts of visits from high-ranking British officials, including the current head of MI6, Richard Moore, to Ecuador to meet. And there were all sorts of inducements and bungs thrown to Ecuador in order to get them to go along with this. And then they did. And so we fast forward to the start of 2019, and Julian is forcibly removed, looking rather dishevelled with his hair going out of control and a rather large beard. And it's like this was actually stage managed. Like they deliberately denied him access to a razor for some time so he couldn't shave. But the point is that Nils Melzer, who was the former UN Special Rapporteur on torture, he refers to Julian's lack of access to the internet as a core component of a wider effort to isolate him, so that when he was thrown to the wolves, there would be no public outcry. And this those words that they echo in my mind now, after being banned from X. Like, I mean, is there something coming next? Is this part of a wider campaign to isolate and demonize me, therefore depriving me of a voice? So
yes,
when they come for me, there's no one's going to speak up. I mean, I am heartened that I have a large number of allies, including people who I have had crosswords with before on Twitter, who have spoken up for me, as you say. That means everything. And I think that after I was stopped in May, I was blown away by the large number of people who wrote to me, who wrote to their elected MPs, who tried to make a real issue out of this, and you wouldn't let it slide. All sorts of mainstream press organizations also issued statements of solidarity or got in touch to make sure I was all right, which meant an enormous amount. Of course, the British National Union of Journalists withdrew its statement in solidarity with me. I gather that this was due to the direct intervention of a rather sinister individual called Peter Jukes, who has a particular loathing for the grey zone and spends an enormous amount of time trying to falsely frame us as working for the Russian government, and not as journalists, but as thugs and criminals. I think that his delusional rantings don't really get much of a pickup outside his echo chamber of Russiagate lunatics and probably British security and intelligence officials. Yeah. But the mere fact that this would be targeted at me is just deeply sinister, and it could literally be anyone next. The British state needs external and internal enemies to sustain itself. They're going after Muslims in a major way. At the moment, that it does not bode well. I have urged my many Muslim friends in the UK to flee the country, and more generally, friends of mine of left-wing opinions who are engaged in Palestine solidarity activism, to get out while they still can, because at least in the short term, you're not going to be able to win with these people, because they will come after you in the most brutal way imaginable, and you may not see it coming until it's too late.
Yes, actually, I suspect, this is my personal suspicion, that there were many cases after October 7 that people were banned or suspended from X, and after an outrage, Elon restored their accounts. But these people were apparently had some. For example, someone in X was decided to suspend them without an official demand from any authority outside of X to suspend them. And now, knowing the information that, for example, the German government sends letters to X and asks them, for example, to withhold certain accounts from Germany. So if you're living in Germany and I have a few followers that I follow them, But if I log in or if I check their accounts, it says this account is withheld in Germany. So of course the governments are cooperating with X. In my opinion, I suspect that this was not only about X, somebody in X who suspended you, but also a demand outside of X to suspend you, because all this outrage that happened, in my opinion, it was enough to restore you if the case was only exclusive for X. So I suspect that there is also something outside of X. But you, like we say in Arabic, you're playing with fire, right? You're criticizing you're criticizing powerful people. I mean, I was reading your article today. The secrecy shrouds British military actions in Lebanon, and it was terrifying because I would just first screen this article. It was terrifying because I come from Syria, and you say that you brought light to a covert initiative by Britain to secure unfettered access to Lebanese territory for its armed forces. I mean, can you please elaborate on this and the motivations of Britain here? Because recently, I just want to show you also some to our followers these towers. Also, they're establishing like towers like this on the borders between Syria and Lebanon. This is from the British side, and also one of the towers, for example, looks like this. Those are all on the borders between Syria and Lebanon. And recently, the Syrian side submitted a protest or an objection to the Lebanese government. Syria registers official protest with Lebanon over UK-supported border towers, alleging towers collect intelligence on Syrian interior that is accessed by UK and Israel in turn, and seeking shared access to intel output. So apparently, according to the Syrian side also, that these towers could gather information from inside Syria, and this information could be data shared with the Israeli side. And based on the information that we know, that Israel is, of course, routinely bombing Syria, the British side could be helping Israel in gathering sensitive information inside Syria in order to hit convoys or hit some sensitive targets, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that this is, yeah, I mean, thank you for highlighting that, because I think that article didn't get nearly enough pickup as it should have done, because this is again another reason why no doubt the British government is probably extremely happy that I'm banned from Twitter, is that I made the point very early on that I think it was it might have been on October 8th. So this is like a little over 24 hours after Operation Al-Aqsa Flood began, that Robert Peston, who is this client kind of crony establishment journalist who's very well connected, of some standing, he took to X or Twitter to announce that based on British intelligence sources, he was certain that this was going to be a wider regional war that's going to be as significant and world-changing as the war in Ukraine. Now, how might the British know this? They were quite clearly hoping. I mean, yes, within 24 hours, yes. They knew that this was. Well, they seemingly believed or perhaps hoped that it was going to be something a lot larger than simply Israel responding to a Hamas attack. Now, they were right about that. Although so far Iran and Syria and Lebanon have been largely they've managed to restrain themselves despite absolutely blatant provocations and deliberate attempts to get them into the war. Because I mean, Netanyahu's in an awful position. Not that I have any sympathy for him whatsoever, because when the war's over, he's going to be out of office and he's probably going to jail for corruption. The longer the war goes on, the worse it is for Israel in all round. Its population is collapsing, its economy is collapsing. I think it's fallen by about 20%, its GDP. There are reports of psychiatrists fleeing the country because they're just finding it too difficult to deal with all of the IOF soldiers who are like suffering mental breakdowns from having to go into the occupied territories and commit genocide. Although again, I don't have any sympathy for them whatsoever. And so it's like, the only way that this can really continue is if Netanyahu drags the US into the war. I mean, the US is finding itself in real trouble, trying to at the hands of glorious Yemen, my new favorite country in the world. God bless you, Yemen. We love you. And Sharala Ace. I'm probably going to jail for that, but I don't care. Yeah. So in effect, like, I think that there is a wider push to get the US all in on this, even though that doesn't seem like it's actually possible. They don't have the muscle or the strength to do it anymore. Britain, again, I would suggest, has a huge vested interest in that, because Ukraine was meant to be where they got the US into direct war with Russia, and then the West would win, and that hasn't happened. And I think that this is a little, again, I wrote about this from Mint Press, but it's little understood or acknowledged that King Charles, who, again, very sadly was diagnosed with cancer recently, he's going to be using purely herbal remedies so I give him about 6 months, but he's a committed Zionist, and bearing in mind that his mother, Queen Elizabeth, she wouldn't go to Israel, and has been suggested that she was privately very sympathetic towards the Palestinians. Her successor, her son, has dumped any and all semblance of neutrality. He has visited Israel many times on official visits. He's been. There are many Zionists and Israelis who were extremely excited about him becoming king, because they got the sense that he was very much a Zionist, and I mean he was a very close friend of Britain's top rabbi, who was involved in all sorts of Zionist advocacy efforts. So yeah, I mean they know that they've got someone on their side in Buckingham Palace. And I make the point that actually the key nucleus here of the kind of wider war in West Asia, if you want to call it that, it might not be Washington DC, it might be London, because the British, ever since World War II, have heavily relied on American strength and wealth in order to pursue their own fantasies of imperial power. For instance, this is not well known, but the Falklands, when Britain recaptured the Falklands from Argentina, which is regarded as this testament to British courage and pluck, actually they couldn't have done this without US support in every way. They just wouldn't have been able to even go there. And it's like that. So in that context, when the US empire is breaking up, Britain's force projection and relevance and clout on the international stage is reduced to basically zero. So that's something to be wary of. And yes, it is rather fitting that they have introduced a National Security Act while they are almost every day their power is waning, because I think if they believe, if nothing else, we can win in people's minds. There is a terrifying Ministry of Defense document from 2010 which states that, well, psychological warfare is the most important form of warfare, because it means that you can still win a war when the physical contest can't be won. Which is basically, 1984 meets Emperor's New Clothes. We can convince people that we've won. We can convince people that Russia is on its knees. We can convince people that we could beat the Russians easily in the war. And then it's quite horrifying.
They just completely distort objective reality nowadays and objective truth. Like Ursula von der Leyen, she was in Ukraine celebrating. It's like the other day, what are you celebrating? 500,000 people died, and Zelensky is Zelensky says they lost only 30,000 people. Like, this is humiliating. He's literally insulting and humiliating his own people for saying 30,000 soldiers only died. So what about the rest of these soldiers?
30,000 a month. I mean, maybe he just meant that month, But it's just this is the thing as well. Is it like I mentioned at the very start of this? Now I must rush off in a minute, but at the very start of this, that like the elites have just gotten to a point now where they're just so brazen, like they just openly lie or admit that they were lying, and nobody really says anything. Like Baerbock, the rather crazed German foreign minister, she openly said the other day, well, we kind of knew the sanctions wouldn't work, but like, what are you going to do? And it's just like, they've destroyed their own economy doing this. And there are all of these reports in the media, referring to Germany's economic collapse and how it's completely screwed. And then it's like, well, why is this happening? High energy costs. Where does that come from? Silence.
You're asking
crickets.
too much. You're asking too much questions, my friend, and I think too many legitimate questions. And since I live in Germany, I'm watching all these videos, and I'm like, if I comment on it, I know 100% that in a few days I will receive a letter from the police calling me for investigation. So
Get out, my
I
friend.
just look.
Get out when you still can.
I don't have suicidal
Come to
thoughts.
Serbia. Come to Serbia. The
Yalla,
Serb
yalla.
Joint Criminal Enterprise. The Serb Joint Criminal Enterprise considers all applicants, my friend. So please, we'd love to have you here.
Kit, since you're suspended now from X, where do you want the people to follow your work? I already have the link for your Substack in the description. You're publishing for The Grey Zone, you're publishing for your Substack, you're publishing for Minge Press, and you're publishing for The Cradle, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say that I have started a Telegram channel, which I think is just K Klarenberg. I've not actually posted anything on it yet, but I'll get to it.
Please send me the handler of your Telegram account to my email, and I will add it in the description below. Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I know that you have another interview, so you have to run. Thank you. His internet probably is gone. My friends, I wanted to make an announcement before I finish this live streaming. Actually, two announcements. I saw some of the commentators asking me that they want to learn about the Israeli lobby and its influence and power over the foreign policy discourse in the United States. So I put in the description below the book of Mearsheimer. The book is titled Israel Lobby and U.S. Foreign Policy. I have personally read that book, I think in 2009 or 2010. It's a brilliant book. If you want to purchase it, go and buy it. It's there are two stores, one from the United States and one from Germany. And those are affiliate links, okay? You're not going to pay anything extra. I just get some commission from it. The second thing that I wanted to tell you is that there is a link also in the description below to register to what was the name? Rumble. Rumble, it's very important, guys, that you have an account on Rumble. So if you want to register, the link of the registration is in the description below. It takes only a few seconds from you to register to Rumble. And then there is another link that you can find my account on of Syriana Analysis on Rumble. Because I want to tell you this, guys, every time I do live streamings and every time I finish the live streaming, the moment I finish the live streaming, the video becomes limited. The video reach is limited. The video is suppressed. The video is demonetized, and they have to look with the microscope in this video if I have said something that they disagree with, or I said something they consider it a misinformation. They're taking down the videos. So it's really suspicious that they open their eyes on me, although I don't have, let's say, hundreds of thousands of views. So in order to stay in touch, please have an account on Rumble. It's important. And then also follow me on Rumble. And I started to post, for example, before the live streamings, I used to post the link of my YouTube live streaming on X, on Facebook, on Telegram. And from now on, I'm only posting the link from Rumble. It's important that we have an access to Rumble and a presence on Rumble, because if I'm canceled from here, if they cancel me, and they're already trying to choke me, let's say financially, because the views started to decrease due to the suppression and due to the limiting of the advertisements on my videos, this also affects my livelihood. I would really appreciate it if you have a Rumble account. And if you want to support my independent work, you can become a patron. The link is scrolling on the screen. Patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. And I will see you tomorrow, guys, at 5 p.m. Central European Time with two guests. We're going to discuss the prospects of regional war between Israel and Hezbollah, especially that Ehud Olmert, the former prime minister of Israel, published an article that says that one of the goals of the current prime minister of Israel is a regional war. So let's see what the experts will have to say about it. One expert from Lebanon and one expert from Belgium. So subscribe and hit the like button. And I will see you tomorrow. Peace be upon you. Salam.